Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody to a fun Sunday night mid-playoffs podcast recording. Elan here. This is not Brian with a makeover. It's of course the great Shams. I guess start the pre-show, Shams. You were just telling me about how you forgot about Ryan Ellis. Do you think Ryan Ellis has a chance to play again?
I have no clue, but he's just like he fit in like perfectly, like the kind of player I like on like fantasy that he had enough banger stats that like I didn't need him to get points because I hate just point defensemen because it feels like unless hell, even if you have the top guys, look at Hedman, there's no guarantee that the points are going to cover the defenseman points. So I like just having I never ended up with them because I always get drafted too high. It's like a Falk or those kind of guys that are just going to do a pile of things. So it's a shame because he played like 5 games maybe total as Philly or like, did he even play?
Yeah, he played like 4 or 5 games. He looked good. I think I recall doing an interview with the Philly beat writer like that summer. He was saying like they just need like a number one defenseman and maybe they got him. They traded like a lot for him. And then it just was like, ugh, like, I just feel like even if Ryan Ellis comes back, that's been like 2 seasons gone. I think we're looking at like an Alex Stalock type of situation. He'll come back and then he'll probably get injured again. Like I think it's
a shame too because like did he have injury history before? I just don't remember much about his career.
Hard to remember.
Anyway,
that's what the theme of this episode is going to be. So, Andy, thanks for joining us in the chat. We'll see if anyone else comes. Obviously, people could also be watching this after the fact. But Shams, I guess we might as well just start the show. See how this goes.
Yeah.
Get our, what's the saying? Work off the rust. What do you do with rust to get it to go away? What do they say?
I think it's work off. I'm too rusty to know, I guess.
Yeah. We'll figure it out as we go.
At least you have a couple of shows. I think it was like the second last it was the last short shifts we did. I think it's the last time I did anything. So that's even before the playoffs started. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I've definitely been a long time since I've done a show that wasn't talking about the playoffs. But shake off the rust, obviously.
There we go. Okay.
All right, here we go. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by a guy who I'm going to have to admit, I had totally forgotten that Jacob Voracek is on the Columbus Blue Jackets until my co-host here reminded me. I'm your host, Elan Dubrowski, and with me for a very fun episode, we're going to be talking about other players that people may or may not have forgotten about. It is not Brian Com. He is, okay, I don't know. I didn't think about what I was going to say for that. Brian Com, he is taking a well-deserved break, and in his stead, we've got from Short Shifts, from all of the amazing retweets at GameDayTweets.com, the great Shams Benamor. Welcome back to the show, Shams.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, it's kind of the dead period now. We only have like 1 or 2 games to have to worry about goalie starts, and then like all the teams that are not in, we're just far enough out of the draft or free agency that you don't even hear any buzz. So it's light retweeting time. The last thing I posted was about the like all-star or however you call them for the world championship. So going a little bit out of our normal bracket of news.
Yeah, I retweeted that the Sabres signed this like prospect, Ryan Johnson. And that was mainly just because I have him in my dynasty league. And I'd been curious to see if he was going to sign with them or not. He was like, who was that guy who the Rangers got where it was like everyone was so unsure like who was going to get him? He was like a college guy. And then what was that guy's name again?
Oh man, I couldn't tell you.
I'm blanking. Or maybe he's like, oh, okay. Maybe this will have to be an edit point, or maybe not. I'm gonna look it up right now. I think he even was on the Rangers last year. I'm blanking. Okay, so maybe I'll edit that whole thing.
It always feels like once a season, there's always like, here's the college guy, and then like 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter. But like that 1 time out of 10, hell with any kind of prospects in the NHL, 1 out of 10 is like big.
Yeah. Oh, the guy was Jimmy VC. Andy's killing it here in the chat with all the corrections for us. Yeah, I remember everyone was like super stoked about VC, and he's turned out to be like never fantasy relevant. But who knows? Maybe Ryan Johnson will be huge for me. But okay, we've got a fun show planned for today. So believe it or not, we're going to be the only hockey podcast not talking about the playoffs this week. Brian and I have done some shows talking about it. We did that round 3 draft. Round 3 is still going. Not for Carolina, of course. They got swept by Florida, and we're going to see if Dallas could come back against Vegas. But you've heard a lot about the playoffs. I don't know when the cup is handed out. Maybe we'll do another show like breaking the final lessons learned. But I think at this point, we all know what's going on. So we were thinking a fun theme for this episode can be that, we're a bit far away now from the end of the regular season. And there's even some things that happened in the regular season, like earlier on that people maybe have totally forgotten. And Shams and I were just thinking, we're going to talk about some players or like things that like happened in the regular season that maybe you haven't forgotten, but you probably should have on your radar going into next year. So maybe some players who performed really well that now, maybe it's just like out of sight, out of mind, or some players that maybe struggled that now we forget stretches. So, okay. So that's kind of the vibe, leaving it kind of open-ended. Just, we want to make sure everyone is back on track for the end of May to make sure you guys, we're obsessed here. So you need to be successful and you need to be prepared for fantasy at any time. And we're going to get into, free agency and trades, and we're going to get really distracted by all of that. So we're going to try to, make sure everyone doesn't forget anything important. That's the plan for today. So we'll get to that in just a sec. Of course, Keeping Karlsson proudly presented by DobberHockey.com. I've been using Frozen Tools to prep this show, and everything else I do basically is my favorite site. Dobber Hockey still with great articles all through the playoffs, so check it out. But with that, Sham, so you've prepared some players. I've prepared some players. We also even asked the patrons, and Andy gave us some suggestions. But why don't we start? You're the special guest of the show. Why don't you throw someone to me that you're... So obviously we're not forgetting about this person because we're presenting them. These are guys that like we think maybe the Gen Pop fantasy player may not have on their mind, and we think maybe they should.
My first example is a person that might get lost where, you're in the start of your draft and you just like some people, I do it even at a certain point, especially in fast drafts where you're just trying to make sure you're not missing anyone. You just sort by total season points. And then this guy didn't play a lot, but when he played, he actually did a lot, and it's Vrana. So he did only end up with like 100 some cupful points. So he's just not going to be anywhere near a position where you can draft him or even on your radar. But the interesting thing is that he did average 4.1 couple points per game, which doesn't sound great, but that's including the 5 games that he was with Detroit, which is actually 20% of his whole season. So the nice thing is that when he was with the Blues, and I know the Blues teams is not the greatest, but the nice thing is that he always seemed to be playing with at least somewhat of good. So there was some times when he was on a really good line with, it was like Hyru and Thomas, that was like a super line at times. Hell, but even when he wasn't on those kind of lines, he did have at least a Shen or someone like, he wasn't buried in a position and was in a nice place to actually get points. And he was doing really well for, especially at the capital that you'll pay for him. So I'm not saying, hey, he's going to be top of your list, but I feel like once you start getting into the middle or the late of your draft, this is going to be someone that, sadly, Verona doesn't do the greatest usually on the second season with teams, but I feel like someone that's a flyer that could be your nice win that helps you carry long term if he ends up hitting.
Yeah, I think Jakub Vrana is a really good pick here. I think, he's like basically forgotten. He used to be someone that got drafted like decently high in leagues, like he had that season where he had like 25 goals and 52 points in 69 games with Washington. I guess that's his like best season. That was back in 2019-20. Things kind of fell off since then. Obviously missed a lot of last season with Detroit, then missed a lot of this season. But yeah, after the trade, he looked pretty good. Like you said, he was getting good deployment. He had some games where he was scoring some goals. And yeah, it seems like the kind of guy that if you could get late in your draft, is that, not a guarantee, of course, but could be the type of player that could end up being someone that you end up holding all season. He's like a pretty decent, valuable contributor. And that's what I want to get with my later round pick. So yeah, definitely not a player to forget about in Jakub Vrana. And actually, I had a guy on St. Louis, so maybe I'll just keep it going with the Blues. Don't forget about Sammy Blais, especially if you're in a Bangers league. What an end to the season for Blais after he got traded from the Rangers. And actually, he's continued it in the offseason because Blais has been playing in this junior championship, or not junior championship, in these world championships, and I'm seeing like 6 goals in 10 games for Blais. And this is a guy who, like, for most of his career, at least in terms of fantasy, as far as I'm concerned, has been like, great for hits, but don't expect much offense. But last year, he ended the season with St. Louis after the trade, 17 points in 20 games. So this is like significant production, and that included still like all the hits. Like you have some games, if you look at the game log, like 7 hit games, 6 hit games, and even an 8 hit game in there. So Blais was just creaming. And, it's the kind of guy who, like, you think of like Tom Wilson, he's going to go super high. Meanwhile, Wilson wasn't even doing that much at the end of the season, compared to someone like Sammy Blais, who you're going to get a lot later than Tom Wilson. And, obviously we'll have to, for a lot of these guys we're going to talk about, we will have to wait until we get the preseason lines, check out the deployment. But of course, things could even change. So you don't want to put too much on that. But yeah, what do you think about Blais as someone else that people need to remember exists going into fantasy next year?
Oh no, I'm with you because I think I've had him in like one or two leagues, and the nice thing with him is that, especially if you're in a categories league or one that values those hits, is that even if he does not we're not saying he's going to hit that rate for 82 games, but for those walls, you're still going to get something. And then also, I'm not sure. Well, I guess he's just, that kind of grinder guy that coaches love, because even if he doesn't, I don't remember like a kind of pedigree or something, but anytime he's with St. Louis, he seems to always be given a chance. So even if they do add like one or two random players, because I can remember the GM, well, when you give Kyrou and Thomas those contracts, no matter how poor you do, they're going to not just go in rebuilding, but feel like he's still going to be put in a position, in worst case scenario, they did like 2 power plays or like the 3 lines that like, it might be bad for others, like your Kyrous or your Thomases, that you want the top line minutes, but it helps these kind of guys make sure that they're not just left on the bench for the whole time and not being involved.
Yeah, exactly. So as long as they're spreading things around, that could be good for a Blais. I guess that Kasperi Kapanen also had a good stretch there at the end. So there's a lot of definitely like potential options on St. Louis that might end up being steals for people. Actually, I wasn't even planning on bringing this guy up, but now that you mentioned it, another name that I think we probably shouldn't forget is Joel Hofer, I think backup goalie for next year. Like Greiss was the backup this year, and Greiss's contract is over, and Joel Hofer has come off yet another good season in the minors. He had a .921 save percentage for Springfield, and looks like only a couple playoff games that didn't go so well, but he was also been in this World Championships. I see a couple games, .925 save percentage over that. So, and the thing with St. Louis, and I'm not saying, I don't want to get too excited. I know someone on our Discord recently was saying how I get always excited about the shiny new toys. I was talking about how someone was asking about a potential trade for Markstrom in like a keeper league or dynasty league. And I was saying like, I would be a little concerned because Dustin Wolf is like coming in, and I think he's really going to be something. I don't know when, but I could see if Markstrom struggles next year, maybe Wolf could even start stealing starts right away. Cause I'm that high on him, and I'm not like as high on Hofer as I am on Wolf. Don't get me wrong, but I am lower on Binnington than I am on Markstrom. So Binnington has had it happen to him before with Ville Husso a couple seasons ago, and it probably would have happened to him this year if there was a better challenger than Greiss. Like Binnington could lose the net. So yeah, there's another name that people should probably have on their minds. And yeah, Hofer got those couple games this season. It was going well. I think the last game was really bad and he got sent back down. But yeah, .905 save percentage overall in 6 games is not a bad start. And we'll see what he does next year. Obviously St. Louis could also just sign someone and maybe he won't even be the backup. So, obviously then throw all this out the window. But assuming Hofer comes in as the backup, I think he could do something.
Oh yeah, he's that kind of person you have on your watch list and like pay attention to like the tweets or whatnot. It depends, obviously, if he starts in the league or if he's. I just have a random feel that he's going to be like probably in the minors. If I'm not sure how old he is, but I feel like he's the kind of guy that they want playing, not just like sitting on the bench for too long. But
yeah, only 22, I should say.
Okay, yeah, so that makes sense. So probably what I would be is that if you're that zero goalie or if your goalies are not working out for you, just have him on your watch list. He feels like that guy that could potentially be like the second he gets a start. That's like not just Binnington's played 20 games in a row, but like, the ones that kind of happened like last season where there was a little bit of contention with Binnington. I am dropping somebody, and I'm willing to drop someone that like I kind of like just to get him into space, because it's going to be one of those like potential lottery picks. But like that situation has to avail itself. So obviously not draft or whatnot, but 100% just going to be keeping my eye on him and the news and St. Louis just to see what's going on. And if something happens, I'll be all over.
Yeah. I mean, there's always the chance Binnington has like a bounce back season. Like, he's clearly like a talented goalie, or he has the ability to be one, but it's a lot of flameouts already. And I wouldn't be shocking to see him do it again. Andy's saying in the chat here, going back to the Dustin Wolf convo, Scuttlebutt as Wolf might be the backup this year. Conroy was talking about that. Oh yeah, new GM, Craig Conroy. So we'll see what happens in Calgary there. Should be interesting. But I mean, like he could start the season as the backup, but Calgary wants to win. They're not a rebuilding team, right? So if Markstrom struggles, the backup could become the starter. So it could happen. And Markstrom isn't a guy who we've seen immune to struggles. He struggled for a lot this past season and lost the net at times. So just two situations actually, both Calgary and St. Louis, where I think it happens all around the league nowadays. It's a different league now. We don't have as many like sure thing starters, and I wouldn't say Markstrom and Binnington are guys I'm going to be drafting very high. Like, if I'm going to draft, I'm like, I just want to have like a solid starter that I could rely on. Binnington or Markstrom are those guys for me. I know for some people maybe they're like higher on Markstrom, which and for good reason. He has a great track record. Just Wolf again. Like, look at his numbers. But obviously he's a rookie. Like, there's no guarantees with rookies, but I'm really into Dustin Wolf for what it's worth. But okay, so Shams, I guess you've only named one of your guys. I just like sort of veered off into St. Louis Blues talk, but I guess we don't need to talk about the Blues. So unless you have another St. Louis Blues player, maybe we can go and try out one of these other 31 teams in the NHL. Who do you have next on your list?
So I'm going to go on the negative idea because I wasn't thinking about bringing it up right away. But since we're talking about goalies, I'm a little wary of Kemper next season because if you just look, it's same idea when I was talking about Verona. If you look at the top goalies, Kemper was actually goalie 10 if you just look at total points. And then that makes you think of like, oh, wow, he's like, you get him late because not a lot of people are talking. But the idea is that he was about 57 points behind goalie 8. So it was like a big lift after like your big name guys. And then on top of that, he did he had a little bit of injury coming in and out and whatnot. And when he was playing, did get played a lot, but like 57 games, like how many more games are you going to get out of like, once you take out the injuries? And on top of it, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but like I had Kemper in one of my leagues. And at the end of the season, after the trade deadline, there was some very, very rough games where like I was just looking for 0 points at a Kemper basically in certain situations because you could just see how poor the game was going. And especially if Ovi wasn't playing, I forget the stat, but it's like something horrendous. And then I feel like there is a chance that this team could go off the wheels because I'm not sure what they're going to do in the near future to help turn around kind of the players they shipped off and kind of set that signal end of late season with the trade deadline.
Yeah, and they're losing some more players. So like Connor Sherry won't be there. He was like kind of a key piece for them. So it will be interesting to see what happens. I mean, John Karlsson being healthy should obviously help. But yeah, no, Kemper, not a sure thing for sure. Like he is a starter. Like I am pretty confident that he'll hold the starter job, like more than those other two guys I mentioned. Though there was a stretch, if you recall. Here's this thing probably most people don't remember. I just looked it up to confirm. There was a stretch where Lindgren was injured around December, and Charlie Lindgren came in. I remember actually I brought up on the podcast some like third stringer guy from the minors that I was like, watch out for this guy. He like didn't even play, but what was his name? He had the same name as like an occupation. That's all I got. But anyways, Lindgren came in and was like really good. He won 7 out of 8 games. So it's not like Lindgren, like he's, Lindgren is a journeyman. Like he's been around. He's only 29 though. I don't think that he's like the type of guy that Washington expects to like steal the job or even challenge. But obviously we'll have to see how much Kemper struggles. But yeah, there's not too many goalies that I have a ton of faith in that like I'd be willing to go super high on. Like it'll be fun when Brian and I do Schmore goalies board, and we'll see how far we veer from, like, how long it takes before we get to like, now here's goalies that I don't have 100% confidence in. And Kemper's definitely like, one of those guys who I'll take like if he falls far enough and I need a goalie, but I'm definitely not like reaching for him thinking he's like a sure thing. And he's kind of like had injury history like all throughout. Like I remember when he was on Arizona, it was really hard for him to stay healthy. He had that good year in Colorado, but like every goalie has a good year in Colorado.
Oh yeah, and that's kind of what I was kind of more getting at is that I think he's going to be in like the no draft zone for me. Is that like I think we're all on the same page. He's not going to go early, but like my worry is that with the amount of points he got last season, if you just look from a totality and not the situation, that I feel like someone's going to reach. And I'm not going to be in the position to take him because I'm with you. Because like these are the kind of guys I like as someone that's going to play a lot. And then like if they have a bad game or whatnot, but like, it's just that one of those situations that maybe wait and see if there's another starter in a different team that doesn't have the buzz instead of trying to reach for this guy, see if there's going to be, I'm not sure. I'm just throwing out if like maybe Husso is in a position to, if the Detroit adds enough players that like that might be the Kemper of next season that I'm happy with, that I don't have to spend the capital to try to get a starter.
Yeah, for sure. Andy saying in the chat, I'm watchlisting Kemper so I could scoop him up when the person who drafts him drops him. Yeah. Or if he struggles, you can trade him, like, trade for him and like with some guy you picked out of free agency who had a good first week of the season. So yeah, definitely. I think we're all on the same page here. Next up, I'm going to take us to Columbus. And here's a player who didn't play most of last year. So I think that maybe he could fall off people's radars. I'm talking about Zach Werenski. So this is a guy who I thought was like poised for a big season, right? Like Seth Jones has been out of the picture, and like Columbus acquired Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason. Like they have all these like good young players. Like I really thought that, I mean, clearly I was wrong. So like now you could decide to listen to me or not for coming this year, but I still kind of feel the same things. Like things obviously fell up, but a big part of things falling apart for Columbus was the injury to Zach Werenski, because this is a guy who, especially in fantasy, just brings so much value and is like, you brought up Victor Hedman as someone who, lost that top power play. Like there's no chance. Like I'd be like beyond shocked if Werenski loses the top power play to like Adam Boqvist or whatever random guy is on Columbus. So it's like his job. It's just the injury is basically what we need to be worried about. But he played 13 games, had 8 points, was averaging over 3 shots per game, which I love. Like I just love a defenseman who could give me a ton of shots, because then he's like helping you in more than just one category. Or if it's a points league, he's like getting you points even if things don't go in. And like theoretically, that Columbus top power play like could be really good. Like we'll see what they do in the offseason. But of course, there's going to be Gaudreau, there's going to be Line. Then you're going to have like, who knows how good like Kent Johnson or Kirill Marchenko can be with a year of experience in the NHL under their belts. So I feel like I don't want to go too far like I did last summer and say like I think Columbus is really going to like surprise us in a big way, but I do think there's a lot of like offensive potential there. And Werenski is someone who just, if obviously if you're drafting by last year's numbers, he's like not on anybody's radar. But I'll bet you, even if you're going by a standard Yahoo list, I'll bet you he'll be lower than he was going into last year. And I don't think any reason to not at least be as high on him as you were going into last year, like assuming we get like a good injury prognosis and whatever, and he's like healthy and playing in the preseason. But like, and there's probably reason to expect him to even have a higher upside this year than he would have last year, just because all those other young guys that I said now have more experience, and the team maybe will, just be that much better.
I know I'm with you there, and definitely I'm just forgetting just how many defensemen. Everyone's like, oh, well, they're now trying this guy at power play. What do I pick him up now? And it was no. And like they tried like 5 or 6. So I'm with you that he has like absolutely no competition. So even if he like, let's just say that he comes back at the start of the season, he's not even in full gear, that like there's no like threat per se. And then, there's enough players around that, as you said, like a Gaudreau and, Boone Jenner still there. So like they have enough people that like, it's not going to be a winning team, but it's not like bereft of skills. So that's definitely going to be a guy that maybe it might be one of those players that like I hope fall, and it could be the kind of defenseman I'm targeting depending on where it falls on the draft board.
Yeah, well, I know you've been sharing recently on our Discord. I think you even said it on the last short shifts, how like you're thinking of not drafting defensemen like super high this year. So maybe like Werenski could be like the perfect like number 1 defenseman for your fantasy team. Let like 10 or so D go off the board, and then once you're looking to make your pick and it's like, oh, the forwards here, like no one's really jumping out at me, like that's the perfect time to like jump on like a Werenski who could end up being like a top 5 D depending on your categories. It wouldn't shock me for him to do it. Like I'm not saying that I'm guaranteeing that, but I think he's like has a decent chance to be top 10 with the upside to be like a top 5 if things break right.
Okay, it is interesting because usually the guys that I like to go for are ones that have like a decent amount of banger stats. And I don't remember him. I'm not sure if he does a lot of blocks, but the nice thing is with him, his upside on points are just so much higher than the people like, for example, I bring up Sorgachev, but no one expected him to get the points that he was getting. I was more just going for the blocks and hits. So that kind of idea of just like finding someone of that point value that late. And I have a bad feeling that someone else is, it's going to be a game of chicken of all the people that like us in the same draft. I think it's like someone's going to have to do it, but hopefully in a league where people are not as interested in just Columbus as a whole, you might be able to snatch them away mid to late and get a nice pick.
Yeah, no, definitely. Columbus, I'm curious to see what they're going to do. And, probably in the end, like I'm sure management isn't like too upset with Werenski's injury. Like maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is like such a dumb thing to say as an outsider. But like they're getting third overall pick in this draft. They're going to get like a real stud. Maybe they wouldn't be getting that pick if Werenski was healthy all season. So maybe not the worst thing in the world for the organization to have lost this guy. But hopefully he's back fully healthy for next season. So we still got obviously a bunch of guys to bring up. I'm basically Shams, as far as I'm concerned. I feel like I have unlimited guys to bring up in terms of like I could just talk all night, but let's we'll set the timer to like around an hour and a half after we started, and we'll get through as many as we can. But first, let's take a quick break, and then we'll go to Shams' next pick. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. All right, we are back. It's Shams Benamor, the master of the retweet. Didn't someone give you like a good nickname? It was something of the retweet. But yeah, you're the hero over on Game Day Lines, and obviously did an amazing job jumping in mid-season on short shifts. And now you're doing a great job here chatting with me about players who people may not have on their radar right now, as they've been focusing on the Stanley Cup playoffs and other stuff going on in the NHL. But we're here to tell you, don't forget about this guy, because he may end up winning you your draft, or in some cases, like a Darcy Kemper, someone you have to remember that you may want to avoid, because it might lose your draft if you reach too high for him. But Shams, where do you want to go next with the players you prepared?
So we did take in suggestions from patrons before this show, and then I think it was Andy. I ended up having this guy already because I had him in a couple of leagues and I love him. Travis Konechny. Is that basically the idea is that it's kind of amazing. He was 94th overall in points, like a couple points. He only played 60 games. And then if you just go by the, by a couple average points per game, he was actually 25th best with 6.06 per game, which is just amazing when you look at it that way. And then we talk about bad teams. The thing is that I know Philly's not going to be adding anyone like big. Potentially Couturier is going to come back, which will be something, but wait and see with his health. But the thing is that the team wasn't that great to begin with. And he did have a little bit of scuffle with Torch and whatnot with the benching, but overall, he was getting played everywhere. I feel like that the coach, this is going to be the kind of guy that was like in his back. He was doing power play. He was doing penalty kill. He was doing important minutes. So I feel like he's going to be put into the position to win. And then even though it wasn't the greatest team, as I just remember in deep leagues, you were just adding enough random people. It was almost like kind of a Blues situation where it felt like there was a player on every single line that could do something. So it wasn't like they didn't have like a lot of game breakers, but it wasn't like they had any true anchors that would have destroyed Konechny if he's playing with them. So that's kind of a thing that I'm going to go for and hope that people think that Philly's just a bad team and don't want to do anything with Philly players, which I almost did. I drafted him, I think, in the 12th round just because no one else did. And then turned out to be this. So I have a feeling that, with the injury late in the season, he may have, at the end of the year, teams that are out of it may have not been giving it all. So he may have not had the last few games that were greatness and people may forget about it. But Konechny is going to be someone that's going to be an interesting part of where you draft him. I'm not sure if I'm going to be drafting him to top 100, but it's going to be someone that could definitely go back there and not surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, you gave season numbers that are super impressive, right? You're saying top 25 and a couple points per game for that's already so great. Then you need to keep in mind that check out the quarterlies of this guy. He started the year, Travis Konechny, 19 points in his first 17 games, and then 27 points in his next 20 games. So he was at one point on pace to have almost 100-point season, 90+ point season. Then he, like you said, he had an injury. He kind of fell off, only 8 points his next 15. And I think that's the kind of thing that then brings him down to a paltry 61 points in 60 games overall. And obviously nothing is a sure thing here, but we're seeing from Konechny that he has the ability to be one of these truly elite fantasy players, someone who could be a top player on your team in a given week. And if you can get him late, that's how you win your drafts. How many people got Jason Robertson in the 5th, 6th, 7th round this past year? Then he ended up being one of their top players. I'm not again, of course, that's a best case scenario for Konechny. But that is when I'm taking a pick in that round, and I don't think he's a big swing. It's not as if you're taking a risk here. But I think that's the kind of guy I'd love to get in like the 7th, 8th round of my fantasy draft. Someone who has the potential to be like a top 5 player on my team that I'm getting that late. So yeah, Konechny has shown me enough that and like Philly overall, I mean, I don't know. That team is like really hard to predict. I just saw a news article today that potentially Carter Hart is on the trade block, which I guess Airson came in and looked pretty good. And I mean, if they could get like a huge return for Carter Hart, it's always tough with goalies. I don't know exactly. I mean, this might just be total rumors and like I just literally like a tweet I saw or something. But either way, Philly. I mean, look, they have. This is going to be just like, this is probably not for next year, but they have like Cutter Gauthier, who had a good tournament. Like people are really high on him. Like Owen Tippett really broke out last year and showed that he could be like a, an impactful player. Pretty wild that Florida basically gave him away for nothing, right? They gave him for Claude Giroux. And then, then Giroux left for free agency and Florida still makes it to the Cup finals. I don't want to be like, oh, imagine if they had Owen Tippett, but it's just like Florida could have been even better potentially. Anyway, we'll see what happens with Florida. Obviously, I'm not going to expect much from this team, but like you said, I think that Konechny is going to be like the guy there in all situations. And so he could potentially be a really great pick. You definitely don't want to forget about that great start. Yeah, don't forget about the great start he had to the season. Don't only look at the final numbers. Remember how great he was at one point, just to tantalize us with what he potentially could be in fantasy. I guess on Philly, the other guy I'll just mention, remember how Tony DeAngelo got randomly scratched for like the last couple of weeks of the season? That's going to be something interesting to think about going into next year. Now, like who's going to run that top power play? Like, can we trust if DeAngelo's doing it in training camp? Can you still trust him enough to draft him? If Torts might just bench him for indefinitely for long without even telling us why?
Oh yeah, it was that worse thing because there was, unless I missed something, not a single word got out other than like I think the closest thing I got, and don't quote me on this, but I think like Tony DeAngelo kind of gave off the feeling that like he didn't agree with it. Like sometimes you'll have like say when Konechny got benched and Hayes, I think got benched in a game or something. Both of them like told the company lies like, yeah, I wasn't playing good or whatnot. Like even if they didn't believe, like you could feel that like DeAngelo was like 100% like not happy, but at least he like didn't divulge. And then, or he's not going to say anything unless he wants to. And he definitely didn't want to talk about this. So there's not even any way to look at it and be like, oh, well, he fixed the thing he was mad at or whatnot. We have absolutely no clue why he was benched.
Yeah, which is frustrating. It's also frustrating just for like, I want the tea. Like, I just want to know. Like, it's probably interesting. But yeah, hopefully we'll find out at some point. Maybe once he gets back in the lineup to start next season. But yeah, so Tony DeAngelo maybe is some guy you need to avoid. Don't just look at his numbers. Especially not points per game because like, it wasn't like he missed games because of injury. Those were healthy scratches there. Okay, I guess I'll go next. Let's go to Arizona. Did we talk about Arizona? Maybe we talked about him like before we started the show. But anyways, I'm going back there. I want to bring up a couple guys, but start with like Barrett Hayton because I think that he's someone that will be available like late in drafts because it's like Arizona and they're kind of like a dumpster fire, especially with the recent news about the stadium and all of that. But like Hayden ended the season playing like top line, top power play, like what we want to see, playing with Clayton Keller. And Hayden had like 43 points in 82 games overall, but he ended the season again, looking at the splits. I'm seeing 18 points in his final 20 games. Like if you added Barrett Hayton for your fantasy playoff run, he was like a key contributor to your fantasy team. High pedigree guy. We talked about it a million times last year. Like he's finally doing it. Maybe not like worthy of like that 5th overall pick in 2018, but clearly someone that at least for now, until all of Arizona's young guys come in and maybe like displace him, could be like the number 1 center on this team. And I don't know, maybe they'll try to win games, but even if not, he was clearly capable of putting up points. So don't forget about Barrett Hayton. And yeah, he could be another guy that you might be able to steal super late in your draft, like similar to like a Verana that we were talking about before, that could end up being like a significant guy for you.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, we joke about how bad the team is, but it doesn't matter what players you're not playing with. It matters who you're playing with. And if you're staple to Keller, I want shares of that. Like, how many points did Nick Schmaltz get? And like, how many could you make the argument was because of Keller? And probably there's like a huge percentage of that. So, and like Hayton has that history. So I'm not saying like, so if someone I have Nick Schmaltz pedigree can be well enough to be on fantasy teams, then definitely a Hayton could be doing something. And then also you got like a decent amount of just like random people that maybe not to the pedigree. Well, McKelly is maybe up there in your non-bangers, just points leagues, but like there's a decent amount of people that have like, depending on the makeup of your league, like a Lawson Krause if you want hits and random points, like maybe a lesser Sammy Blay at this point. Can't believe I'm using that sentence, but anyway, is that like there's just a lot of just random parts that depending on the situation, how they play out in the season and your fantasy league stats, that Arizona could be a person to pluck from the waiver wire or late in the draft and get some nice value.
Yeah, like you're even falling or not falling for, but you're even like sort of portraying a fallacy or not a fallacy, but like, okay, let me actually just do this whole thing again. Yeah, and to be honest, like you're actually a great person to ask a question to from what you just said, because I've always been perplexed with how Nick Schmaltz like doesn't get enough like credit or like enough respect. At least like when I play, like, whenever I was doing these drafts, like you could only take players like rostered in 50% of leagues or fewer. Like we did one actually like that. I think Schmaltz was available, and it's like, what does this guy need to do? And even now, you said like, oh, he probably got most of those points because of Clayton Keller. Like I'm looking at Nick Schmaltz here, 58 points in 63 games last year. Like, yeah, obviously he benefited from playing with Clayton Keller, but I don't know. I think we're getting to a point where I'm ready to say that Nick Schmaltz is just like pretty good, maybe really good. Like he's now at a 70+ point pace in each of the past 2 seasons, but it doesn't even matter if he's good or if it's just because he's playing with Clayton Keller. As far as fantasy goes, like for me, it's pretty obvious. You want Keller first, Schmaltz second, and then like, yeah, then Barrett Hayton would be probably my third right now on Arizona, like barring, we'll see what happens in the offseason. But yeah, do you want to fan some flames on this Schmaltz disrespect?
I don't know. It's maybe I was a little hard. You can't know everyone, but like really what it is like all I'm saying is that maybe he might not be a line driver on himself, but either way, the way I look at it is that all the points come out the same in fantasy, no matter if you believe he deserves it or not. But like, just you bring up a good point of just like you're hoping you have more me in the draft room so you could be plucking these random Arizona players that just to back your mind just thinks Arizona avoid. But as we were mentioning before, there's enough decent people, but maybe just, keep in mind that if something was to go out in left field and team just a tank, now hopefully nothing happens to Keller like it did last season. That we'll see how things turn out.
Yeah, like obviously when there's injuries, like everything goes out the window. But yeah, I think Hayton could be good. And yeah, there's also, you brought him up quickly, Matthias Michelli. He was just a rookie last season and like did pretty darn good, right? 49 points in 64 games. That's a 63 point pace. Like it was mostly assists and he didn't take too many shots, only 1 shot per game. So depending on your league format, that's obviously a big downside of Michelli, but also you got to keep in mind, you can't just assume because he had only 1 shot per game this past season that that's what he's going to do next season. He was a rookie. He was young. Like maybe he's going to like work on some things this summer and get better. And like, I just told you the total points again, going to those splits. Michelli ended the season with 19 points in 20 games. So once Arizona started just offloading everyone, Michelli got like more opportunities. I see he got some top power play time, I guess with like Chikrin and Gostisbehere out of the picture because they were at some point using like both defensemen on the top power play. So that would be, I guess, my 4th pick on Arizona at this point. And we haven't even mentioned any defensemen. We'll see what they do, right? At the end of last year, just to completely refresh everyone's memory. So, like, obviously, it was Chikrin and Gostisbehere. They were both sent away. And so it was Juuso Välimäki quarterbacking the top power play. And, there's only 32 of these top power play quarterbacks generally in the NHL. So if nothing changes, I don't see like Arizona. It would be fun if they like signed Gostisbehere now. I wonder if they could do that since it seemed to fit pretty well. But like assuming Arizona doesn't go to get anyone, who else is on this depth chart? Like maybe like there's some prospect heads right now that are yelling at the podcast being like, oh, obviously you're not thinking of this guy. But I think there's probably a decent chance that they just continue to do at least what they did last year to start this next year. So also even Juuso Välimäki is someone we need to have on our radars as a late pick, especially if you're passing on defensemen early, which I know is your strategy, just trying to get the whoever's left late.
Yeah, and then also say for like both of us are in a league that are, if I remember correctly, I think like power play points is a bonus in there. So like this is going to be that kind of defenseman late that you can take and then still have that chance to like stumble into those kind of points. So definitely, depending on your league settings, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of just like nice players that you could just take low cost bets on, depending on if you need hits, power play points, or whatever that you can might get an upturn. And you know what? At the end of the draft or off the waiver wire, if it doesn't turn out, just turning into someone else. So if it looks weird, it's not the end of the world if it doesn't play out.
Well, of course, yeah. I'm seeing they have a Maverick Lamoureux, who was drafted 29th overall last year, but I think he's more of just like a big guy. I don't even think he's supposed to be like someone who. So theoretically, Valimaki has an opportunity to really like, carve out a spot for himself with not too much competition. So we'll see. So Shams, where do you want to go next? For you, are you going to go to someone who was good or bad last year that you want us to remember?
This is more of a buyer's beware. So it's kind of the funny thing is that the last thing we saw of him was good, but it doesn't hide what's going to possibly be happening next season. And the player I'm talking about is Jake Sanderson. And I think this is more of just a conversation of Ottawa's defensemen, just because they have, at the end of the season, both Shabbat and Chychrun were hurt. So it was just Sanderson playing everything. And then I had him in a couple of leagues because he was top power play, getting all the minutes. And then that's what might be fresh in your mind when you're getting around to the draft. And also everyone, like, I'm not a prospect person at all, but anytime someone talks about Sanderson, they love him and his upside. So like you might be hearing conversations of that and getting excited, but really the problem is unless something gets really blurted out, and honestly, even if the coach says, hey, he's my power play one, stuff could change. And then just having Shabbat, Chychrun, and him, just going to be an awkward dance to take any large bet on any of those players, even if he did well when he had the chance at the end of the season.
Yeah, like I think Chychrun is like a good bet because he'll probably fall in drafts, and even if he's not on the top power play, he like takes so many shots and like he's like good for peripherals, so you kind of get a lot from Chychrun. And he's actually someone also I just want people when you like were talking about who Ottawa has, I was wondering if some people like didn't even remember that Chychrun is on the Sens because he got traded to the Sens, and then he like got hurt and like whatever. It's sort of just like the season faded out and Ottawa didn't end up even like really contending for the playoffs. So yeah, don't forget that Jacob Chychrun is on Ottawa, and I think he's like really great. Like I think that I don't know if he's taking top power play, but I think if he's falling pretty far in your draft, that's another D I'd love. Now there's no chance I'll get it because I know who I'm drafting with is going to be listening to this probably. But like I definitely wouldn't mind when I'm in tier 3 of the couple next season if I could like wait to like round 4 or 5 and get Werenski, maybe wait a couple more rounds, then grab Chychrun. Then wait to the very end, get a Valimaki, and then, throw in one other random guy in there. That's like not a bad 4 defenseman, I think. We'll see if I can pull it off. But yeah, Ottawa, like I say, it's going to be potentially a 3-headed monster in terms of who gets the power play time. They might just do 2 even power plays, which generally is not like amazing for a guy if you want to get like a ton of power play points, but they do have the offense to do it, right? Like Claude Giroux had this incredible run last year, and a lot of it was like as a second power play guy. So we'll see. Like next year, they're going to have Josh Norris back for the season, you'd imagine. So that's just another strong piece. I know there's been some scuttlebutt about. This is the second time scuttlebutt has been used in this podcast, but first time I was quoting it. This is the first Elan scuttlebutt. But yeah, Alex DeBrincat apparently like doesn't want to sign long term, so maybe the Sens would be better off to trade him now while he still has a year left under, like he's RFA now, but so they'll have him under control. But if he only is willing to sign like a bridge deal, then maybe the Sens want to think long term and just trade him before they lose him for nothing to free agency. But yeah, assuming they get him back, like all I meant to say is that they could have like just 2 stacked power plays with like big name guys, and so that could be good for any of those defensemen. Though, like it's almost like at the same point. So tell me if this is like I'm like contradicting myself here, but like Thomas Chabot is someone who I feel like I would fade a little bit. Like Sanderson is someone you could get potentially late, so he's like a good swing, and Chychrun I like for other reasons, like I said, like those peripherals, and and I feel like he's already going to fall. But Chabot, like he'll probably fall in drafts just because this past season, well, he probably won't actually. I didn't even realize this until I'm looking. Chabot ended the season with 79 points. That can't be right. No, I'm looking at Claude Giroux. Okay, I knew I opened up a player in Ottawa, and then I was looking at these numbers like, there's no way this was Thomas Chabot. Okay, yeah, no, Thomas Chabot ended the season with 41 points in 68 games, so 49-point pace, which isn't too far off of what he'd done before. But the big thing going into next season that won't be the same as like in previous years is he's not guaranteed that top power play, and that could be a big like that could take a lot, right? Like last season, his 41 points, 20 of them were on the power play. Like that's almost half of the points that Chabot put off. So Chabot put up. So you might be like in your draft and just seeing that you need a defenseman, and you might just see the name. You go, oh, Thomas Chabot, that's pretty good. I'll take Chabot here. Like it's pretty late, but yeah, I would just think twice of if you really want him, knowing that there's that risk. But he could still be really good. Like clearly he has the ability, but it's just like higher risk. Kind of like maybe Chabot now is kind of like a Victor Hedman, actually, who maybe we could just talk about next. Like someone who for the longest time was the sure shot, like no competition top power play guy. But all of a sudden now in, Tampa, there's Sergachev, who took it for a long time. And in Ottawa now, Sanderson and Chychrun. So you still like know they're good players, but maybe you don't want to go too ham. But yeah, did you have Hedman on your list by any chance?
No, like he definitely he's not on my list, but like 100% fits this category because like basically I feel like I think I've said it enough times is that I'm just not a big fan of like the top tier defensemen. So I've like already kind of put myself in the position, but I'm with you is that there's no sure bets with what looked like sure bet defensemen that now that Hedman has that like chink in the armor to go with it. Just makes me even more scared is that, and by the sound of it is the weirdest part was that, because as I said, like I picked up Sergachev in like drafts because I was like, oh great, I literally was drafting him knowing that he was like going to be second power play. I just wanted the peripherals and whatnot. So I wasn't even expecting it with Sergachev, but the idea is it wasn't like, oh, Hedman did poorly. There was nothing to really point at. And then that's the scary part for next season. It's not like, oh, if he, has a good weight room or does something in the off season that he's going to protect himself. It was just felt like a situation where for whatever reason the coach decided. So there's no real way for you to calculate the likelihood of that happening or not. It's just could happen or not.
Yeah, Hedman just had such a crazy season. It's just like if you look at the splits again, that's what I like to do. It's kind of in these off seasons just to get a little more context, not diving too deep, but just like a little deep, looking into quarters. And also it's so easily presented over on the upper, like on Frozen Tools. I just like that on their stats page, you get to see the quarterlies here. And like Hedman, like two different players, right? He started with 10 points in 19 games. So like a slow start, then 17 points in his next 19. Like, so that's just like vintage Hedman, almost point per game. Then 15 points in 21 and then 7 in 17 to end the year. So really fell off. And obviously there was a lot of time where he was just losing that top power play. And so he's definitely someone who's going to fall a lot in drafts, which is almost like, don't let him fall too far. Like I just feel like he is Victor Hedman and he does have that great floor. Like he's definitely not like lost like a ton of steps, but yeah, like Sergachev, even in the playoffs, in the 5 games that Tampa played, Hedman only played 21% of the power play overall. So yeah, maybe this is like just Sergachev's job for real right now and not just one of these like, just switching back and forth every once in a while.
Oh yeah. So kind of circle back as what you're saying with Hedman is that I know I brought it onto myself, but I kind of have the mantle of hating defensemen. But really for me, my biggest point is to not reach for defensemen. So the idea is that let the people get excited about a particular player, and then you could take the player maybe in the range of his value, basically not adding points for like value over replacement. So that really the idea is that a Hedman could be, if you're willing to take a risk, if he drops, could be an interesting player to take. I'm not sure I'm going to be willing to take. I'm one of those players that like to take safe picks at the top of the draft and take my risks later. But if you want to go for a swing or whatever your reason is, at a certain point, I feel like, and I'm not sure how far I'm going to have to start looking at projections or whatnot once we get closer to the season, but he could be an interesting player to take. And you could end up with like, a top 3 defenseman if he somehow like keeps the power play and whatnot. Because if he has the playing time, we know he can do it. So it's just that dance that you have to play. And if you're willing to take that risk and he has the skill to keep it, you could get a really strong player.
Yeah, I mean, if I had Hedman on like in a keeper league or something, I'd be going, emailing the coach or something, being like, "Hey, every year Hedman's top power play and Tampa does great. All of a sudden, you put Sergachev top power play, then they're eliminated by the Leafs in the playoffs. I mean, come on, man. Let's just go back to what we know works here." So maybe maybe there'll be some of that thinking. Okay, I'm curious with all this talk on D and how like they're not, like I'm just curious to like how many like thing D there are in your head. I'm gonna run by some D with you. I don't know, like maybe you'll just say right away, like just no one is like, there's some names to me that still like really jump out as like I'm like so confident this guy's gonna be amazing, and I'm like have no concerns. But maybe I'm wrong about that, because I guess last year with Hedman I probably would have said that and I was wrong. But no chance happens with Miro Heiskanen, right? To throw out a name like Heiskanen, come on, he's gonna get 60 plus, maybe 70 points, and no one's gonna steal any time from him.
Well, my question is that like, what's the forward you're not drafted because of him?
Sure.
Because that was the thing that was for me. I don't have the draft in front of me, but like I was able to get like, I just loaded up on just so many of just like, basically you make that same argument of like, luckily, as we said, it was with Jason Robertson's a special story because of the contract, but like I was able to get him in the 4th round. So like, there's going to be other players like hell, like even like different forwards and whatnot. But like, that's really my argument, is that it's nothing on the player. It's just that like you could get a really strong forward that is more likely to do well at that same spot. So like at Heiskanen, I would love, but it's just, I'm not going to be in a position where I look at like, like what round do you think he's going to be in? And then like, if you gave me an option of player of forward at that same area, I feel like probably every situation I'll take the forward, but like, it's not really a slight to a Heiskanen or say a car, like taking out the injured. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not really saying anything but those particular players. It's just those forwards are just so good at that part as well.
Yeah, I hear you. But I mean, Evan Bouchard, come on. What a great no, okay, fine.
Okay. Well, the funny thing is that talking about Bouchard, I'm not want to bring up him. And then this is probably more of me just being a paranoia and getting a stickler at the end of my cat league, is that Darnell Nurse, I am really just paranoid about his role as a defenseman in Edmonton. Because basically, really, the idea is that no one ever said that he was going to be top power play or he's going to get all the points in the world. But he's going to get infinity blocks and infinity hits. And that's how he's going to carry you. And then now, as what I saw is that Bouchard getting a good amount of minutes. Also, they had Ekholm traded. Is that I feel like they needed to lead on Nurse less. Now, keep in mind, if you look at the playoffs, that's a totally different story. But I feel like the playoffs is its own bubble in a different situation where you're not worrying about long term. But if you look at the end of the regular season, it felt like that while still good, Nurse wasn't getting just those like A++ worth of minutes. And then because of that, he wasn't just getting the monstrous hits and blocks. So that idea that he was just kind of a lock for those kind of stats, he might end up with them, but it's just a buyer beware of just at the later of the season that there was situations where he would get like, I saw stat lines of like in the last quarter that he would get like a shot or two, no points, and like a hit. And then I remember like there's times where you could have like 5 hits and 5 blocks and just be like used to it. I just feel like that he could be in a position where they lean on him not as insanely, which could help diminish his overall fantasy value in bagger leagues.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there with Darnell Nurse. I think that there's definitely a chance that there will be stretches where his like ice time goes down. Yeah, and then all of those peripherals go down with him. Like the big difference is you brought him up, Ekholm, who the Oilers love. And that's just more minutes. They didn't have Ekholm before. They had Tyson Barrie, who barely got any even strength minutes. So someone has to take a hit. And maybe it's Nurse. And, they also still have like Broberg. I don't know if like one day Broberg gets more minutes. I don't understand why he never gets to play. Like in the playoffs, they were playing this guy Desharnais, and I would see on Twitter just like people ripping Desharnais like game in, game out. Like all the fans just hate him so much. And it was often like search for tweets with like both Desharnais and Broberg in them. There's like a lot of them because it's just all the Oilers fans being like, stop giving minutes to Desharnais, give him to Broberg instead. But anyways, all that to say, yeah, Nurse could have some more competition for like that like sure thing like 25 minutes a night like that he used to have. Like, and by the way, I'll just mention Matthias Ekholm there. That actually concludes my dream cupful draft. Give me Valimaki and Ekholm as my last two picks when I'm filling my D spots. Ekholm ended the season with 14 points in 21 games with the Oilers. Do the math. Small sample size, of course. A couple of big games in there and a few quiet ones, but that's a 60 plus point pace, I believe. No, 55 point pace. If you take that 14 divided by 21 and multiply by 82, you get 54.6. So that's like very rosterable in a lot of leagues. Ekholm, and he's like pretty decent for periffs. So this is not the Matthias Ekholm of the Nashville Predators. Like the Oilers love him, and he's going to be on the ice with all these like big scores. So maybe he won't be like a 55 point guy, but like 45 to 50, I think is totally reasonable for Ekholm. Like I don't see why he can't have similar offensive upside as what we've expected from Darnell Nurse these past few seasons. So he's definitely also someone we don't want to be forgetting about. Okay, so whose turn is it here? Do you want to go or do you want me to go next?
I have one more person on my list. I had 6 altogether. So
perfect.
This one is, it's going to be a wait and see. I feel like this one's going to be a lot more of paying attention to the preseason and whatnot. It's Raphael Harvey-Pinard. Now,
him.
I know I looked it up. He did shoot 24%. So like, I'm not expecting him to go off with the shots and whatnot. But the nice thing is that like, I thought like I envisioned him as McKelly, but funny enough, he did actually have 1.68 hits per game and 1.65 blocks per game. So he was actually like getting a little bit of the peripherals. He doesn't shoot, so that's going to be kind of a concern. But like they were putting him in positions with like decent players at times, like with Suzuki. Now it's going to be interesting to see how they deploy him when Caulfield's back, and if they have like anyone that's healthy to be possibly playing on a second line. So like this one is going to be a lot more of a research, but like just a name to keep in mind once we get close to the draft, and then to make sure that he checks the boxes that he's getting the play time, getting it with the right people. And it could be a person that, same idea, we're talking about a lot of interesting players on poor teams that you might get with like a last pick that could actually be pretty interesting depending on how deep your league is and what it takes in for your stats.
Yeah, like RHP probably isn't someone I'm drafting if it's not like with a last pick. And even with that, I'm only taking him with a last pick if Montreal has like a good schedule, for the first couple of weeks to start the season. But like if they do, he could be good. But obviously we'll look at line combinations and stuff. But yeah, definitely good fun to remember how great he did last year when he did get the chance to play with Suzuki. Though you bring up Cole Caulfield, he's kind of like another Werenski, right? Maybe he falls in drafts just because people kind of forgot about him after the injury. Caulfield had 26 goals in his 46 games before he got hurt. That's a 46 goal pace. So we're looking at like a guy who was pacing for like, if he could be like a 45 plus goal scorer and maybe get a few more assists. He wasn't getting too many. Like the previous season, he paced for more assists. So I could see Caulfield being like really great value. And like, if people are letting him fall, like maybe the strategy for next year is like, yeah, target some of these guys who just were injured. And yeah, you want to get value in drafts. Obviously, you just also want to take guys that are like sure things. But I think Caulfield is like as close to a sure thing as you can get. He is their trigger man there on the top line and on the top power play. Hopefully he comes back 100%. Can I throw another random name at you in Montreal? I've been hearing a lot about him lately because he's been having a good tournament there in the world. Sam Montembeault. Have you been seeing any of the Sam Montembeault love on Twitter?
Can't say I have, but the nice thing though is it's not like he's going to be fighting against a lot of people to get playing time if he ends up showing up in Montreal. It's like, I don't even know, is Jake Allen even like have that much of a contract left on him? Because like,
I mean, I've been seeing Yeah, like Allen, I think has 1 year left. I've been seeing a lot. Oh no, 2 years left actually, still for Jake Allen. I've been seeing a lot of people. Again, this is Twitter, like fans of the Habs, which are like very like loud and many and numerous. But a lot of people are saying trade Allen and stick with Montembeault and get Caden Primo up there. I think that's what a lot of Habs fans are wanting to see. But yeah, just like Montembeault like helped Team Canada in this tournament, 939 save percentage in his 7 games. And Montembeault has been like fantastic. And then like a lot of people have been tweeting about how Montembeault actually last year, like don't, you got to look beyond the numbers. When you look at the advanced stats, like Montreal was just like so bad. They were letting in all these high danger shots. But if you just focus on, oh yeah, it's a tweet from Michael Amato saying Montembeault was very underrated in fantasy this season, faced 40 plus shots 10 times and was great for total saves. And anyway, Montreal will probably still be terrible, so you probably just don't want to depend on any Montreal goaltender. But I don't know. Maybe if you need a goalie and it's a deep league, like Montembeault is seeming to turn a corner. Like there was a time where it just seemed like he wasn't an NHL goalie back when he was on Florida, and then like first came to Montreal. Like it just didn't seem like he had it in him. But last year, it seemed like he was outplaying Allen for like stretches. And I wouldn't be shocked to see Montembeault end up playing the most games for Montreal next season. Also, Allen's like injury prone. But yeah, we'll see what if they keep Allen or trade him. But I think even with Allen there, I wouldn't be surprised to see Montembeault. Like I said, yeah, get more starts.
Oh yeah, and like playing goalies on bad teams, you do have the level of risk of getting blown up, but depending on how your league is set up, those shots are just so nice. Cause like there was a league where I ended up just like having a late pick and like it was a keeper league. So all the great goalies were taken. And like I think I had like my first round pick traded away or whatnot. So like all the interesting goalies ended up getting taken away. And I ended up taking Jake Allen and he did like serviceable for like the draft capital I spent on him. So like if Montembeault gets the same amount of play time and like that he did last year roughly, and then like by the sounds of it has the potential of being a better player as well. Because like, Montreal has some interesting players, but it's not like they're going to be a barn burner or anything like on the fence or whatnot. So could be that, the Vejmelka kind of style of not as good as a goalie, but going to be put in a position to get a lot of shots. And then hopefully those shots just like cover up the 4-goal game, but it has like, 37 saves. So it still ended up being a half decent point total for you.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Just not in GAA leagues. But you shouldn't be in one of those.
Oh.
Those are annoying. I actually have another hab I wanted to bring up, but let's take our final break here, and then you're through your list. So then I'll just like run as many names by you as I can for the final half hour of the show before we run out of time. So you're listening to Keeping Karlsson. We'll be back in just a sec. All right, we are back. I am Elan Dubrowski. I am here with Shams Banamore. I like treating this like a radio show. Like it's not the radio. Like for sure, no one is just tuning in now. Like if you just tuned in, I'm here with Shams. Like that would be really weird. I don't even know how you can manage that to just find this spot in the podcast without having listened to the rest of it. But we're back. We're talking these players we don't want you to forget, and we're on the Habs. They're kind of turning into an Arizona Coyotes because I have a lot of guys who's like, oh yeah, remember how this guy was really awesome? And how about Mike Matheson? I feel like he's worth bringing up, right? He like had that incredible run at the end of the year, 16 points in 20 games to end the season for Matheson. And overall, like it wasn't that he was like bad at the start of the year. He just barely played. He was just injured for so long. He came back and he got hurt again. Overall, though, 34 points in 48 games. That's a 58-point pace. That's like incredible, right? And he was even better than that once he got going right there at the end. And this is a situation where who is his competition? Like, is this like a Zach Werenski situation where it's just like maybe one day Lane Hudson takes the job? Like, I don't know, like they have some guys, Caden Gooley, I know people like, but I think for next year, this is Mike Matheson. If he's healthy, he's on the top power play with good players, Caulfield, like Suzuki, etc. Maybe there's a drop off after that. Is Slavkovsky ready to give it another crack? But if Matheson could even be like slightly less, but still somewhat close to what he did at the end of last year, okay, let me recap. Okay, I'm changing up my plan for drafting defenseman in a couple. Here's my dream. Okay, I'll take Werenski. Forget about Hedman, actually. He'll probably still go too high for me to take the chance on him. Werenski in round 5, if lucky. Then, yeah, give me Matheson in round 7, maybe is possible. Then Chychrun in 8. I don't know. Maybe now I'm spending too much on defensemen too early. Maybe now I'm going against the Shams plan. I feel like there's going to be value here. That's all I'm saying.
Oh yeah, and the defenseman, it's weird. It's like I'm with you that no one should take Matheson's spot on power play one, but forget if it was last season or the season before, but it was like the coach just loved. I think it was Weidman would just like get like all of the power play time for like no reason and do nothing with it and would just keep on getting it. So like hopefully Matheson did enough in the end of the season to give it a rope or just like a level of trust to play. Because I'm with you, is that like, and maybe I was overthinking it. I just love Matheson so much at the end of the season, and I couldn't stop talking about him that my brain took him out of the do you remember? Because I was just always talking about him. But like for maybe a more casual, or especially when we're talking about September coming along and you don't have the end of the season as fresh in your mind, that he's definitely a guy that could be like, I don't envision anything really changing in the offseason for Montreal defensively that would put him in a worse position, but he could be in a position to restart doing the same things.
Yeah, it wouldn't be surprising to see. I feel like 50 points is like a pretty solid floor, assuming nothing changes. And then we've seen upside for like 60. So next up, I kind of have a similar guy as what you were just saying about Matheson, or a guy that I talked about so much at the end of the year that I clearly didn't forget about him, but maybe some people did. I'm going to go to Nashville now. I think you know where I'm going here. But Tommy Novak. Okay. So obviously there were injuries. Forsberg was out. Duchesne was out. Everyone was out. Like, I still think it's fun to just go and look at like what the Nashville top power play looked like in the last game of the season. It was Cody Glass, Phil Tomasino, Tommy Novak, Luke Evangelista, and Tyson Barrie. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Like, remember that Tyson Barrie's on Nashville now? But obviously Roman Josi was hurt, and so he'll be back and bumping Barrie. But anyways, like all those four forwards that I named, like could all have value next year. Like I think there's upside for all of them: Glass, Tomasino, Novak, and Evangelista. But like, you know, Tomasino, Evangelista, and Cody Glass are all like high pedigree guys, high-ish pedigree. I think all first rounders, or at least or second round. Tommy Novak is definitely not that. He was a third round pick way back in 2015, the same year that Connor McDavid was taken first. Nashville waited and finally got their gem in Tommy Novak, and it took him a while, but finally got up to the big league. Well, actually, he did get some time. I'm seeing a 21-22, but only 7 points in 27 games. He was only playing like 11 minutes a game on average. But yeah, last year, Novak came in and just right away, like exploded. All said and done, 43 points in 51 games. That's a 69-point pace. So basically 70-point pace for Tommy Novak, who's like a total nobody. So who knows, like after there's no more injuries, like, you know, if he's even on the top power play next season. But if I'm in camp and seeing the lines and seeing that Novak is top 6, and especially if he's still on the top power play, I'm not letting him go undrafted. I'll take a guy with potential 60 plus, maybe 70 point upside. Like maybe you can look at then be like, maybe he had a high shooting percentage, which he did, 18.3%. He scored 17 goals. So maybe that goes down a bit. So that's why maybe I'm not going to say like 70-point upside again like he did last year, but even like 60, you know, if he gets the deployment, he's shown that he can do something with it. So I don't even really want to like make a projection here. Actually, I kind of regret saying any of those numbers. I'm just like saying, remember what Tommy Novak did. He did it for a long time, 51 games. That's not like a handful of games. You know, it's more than half a season, and he put up a 69-point pace. So you make of that what you will, listeners and Shams.
Oh yeah, I'm with it. I'll be honest, I didn't realize he actually got that many points. So that is kind of amazing. Is that like, because I remember it was like him and Evangelista, and I think there was a third that like, it was like a running joke of what players going to be debuting in the NHL this season and it's going to be on top power play line one. I think they did it with like 2 or 3 players, and it was just kind of like, ah, ha, ha. And like, I remember that he did it well. I didn't realize how well he sustained it. So like, honestly, like I'm looking in, I echo you. I love frozen tools of just like all the stats. And like, for example, line combination for Novak, it was like in the fourth quarter was Kiefer Sherwood and Evangelista was like his most common line mates. So say if he ends up getting power play, like he doesn't even need the like all-star players of like, he doesn't need to be lining up with say like a Duchesne or a Forsberg in 5-on-5. Like if he could just get them like be on the power play with them, and then like doing decently enough that, like, for example, you got 20 points in the fourth quarter, only 6 of them were on the power play. So like he was getting 14 points 5v5 with these kind of guys. So just not going to be that power play crown jewel. And then like if he's randomly on a second line with some people you're not sure you heard of before seeing the lines, it still might be fine to get some points out of him.
Yeah, here, let me ask you a strategy question here. And I'm going to blow myself up now because I know that people in my Dynasty League, some of them at least listen to this podcast. I have Tommy Novak. I like to brag because Maddie and I always trade away all of our picks. And then we just get these gems out of FA. It's the best feeling. There's no better feeling than getting a 70-point pace guy out of free agency in a deep league like this. I need to explain this to non-fantasy people that it's like, you don't understand what you're missing. But we have this guy now, and we actually had like this glut of centers. So we were like, think we need to trade a center, especially like Pavelski on Fantrax just lost his right wing. So if he's center only, we were like, oh boy, okay, we need to maybe send someone away. We ended up trading away Nazem Kadri. So now we're not as up against it. We got a Neil Pionk, by the way, for anyone curious. It's a Bankers League. But anyhow, and a cap league. So we're happy to dump that salary. Even though I do think there's a chance that Kadri could bounce back next year with a new coach and whatever. That's going on too big of a tangent. Anyways, Maddie and I were trying to decide, like, is now the time to sell high on Tommy Novak? Or is it like no one's really going to believe in him enough to like give us like a big piece? And I did put him on the trade block for a little bit and we weren't really getting many bites. So I feel like it's the kind of thing where maybe I need to wait for him to like start, like he has to also start next season strongly for people to start actually believing in him. Or maybe, you know, the strategy is just like get something for him now before he totally disappears. I'm not sure. So it's so hard to predict with these guys that come out of nowhere like Novak did.
I feel like for your team, because I know you're Mr. Always Win It Now, so it might be an interesting thing to get. Like I feel like if I don't always go for it right away. Like I try to straddle both, which it may not be the best way. I never tank, but I never just like trade in all my picks. And like a Novak is something great because like he could be a now person or a later person. So I kind of like him, but like in your sense of, I feel like it might be in a situation depending on cap or whatnot. Maybe it might be if like a sweetener of like, if you have like, just throw it out like a Pavelski for some reason, if you want to get rid of him because he's no longer a center or he's only a center, which I don't understand why, because he's playing with hints. But anyway, the like him and then Novak, and you get like to get a now guy, and then you sell him as a sweetener possibly. But like it really depends on how someone else has to fall in love with a prospect. So I would be willing to trade him because it is like, as we said, it's not like a sure bet, but like he has at least enough promise that like there's probably a lot of other teams in your dynasty league that like someone else is going to be bereft of prospects that maybe they might be willing at after the draft or something that they want to upgrade somewhere where they didn't get the person that they wanted.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, that's a good idea to like use them as a sweetener. That's always like a good strategy, I think, in trade talks. If you have someone that you think has some value but not enough to like get you a marquee guy. It's funny though that we keep calling Novak a prospect. He's 26 years old. Like he's some other players in his situation would have like 8 years of experience under their belt already if they were like a Kotkaniemi and started as an 18-year-old. So yeah, I guess he did just lose his, or he still has prospect eligibility in this league because it's 82 games. He played like 51 and 27 the season before. So he's just about to lose it. But anyhow, okay, I guess I should probably just not keep talking about my own league. I remember when we started the podcast like 8 years ago or whatever it was. And when we posted on Reddit, like, yo, can anyone give us feedback on the podcast? Like the number one feedback was like, stop talking about your leagues. No one cares. I think we used to start every show of keeping Karlsson with like, so Brian, how'd you do in your league last week? Then he'd like talk about if he won or lost his matchup. And I was like, no one gives a crap about that. Okay, so who do I have next on my list? Okay, how about a really deep cut here? This is like makes Tommy Novak look like a household name. But remember in San Jose at the end of the year, if you recall, they traded away Timo Meier to New Jersey. I think most people remember that. And we could probably even talk about how Meier like struggled, but Brian and I've covered that even already, and also in the playoffs. But anyways, a new guy came in from Dallas named Jacob Peterson. And with San Jose not having too many players available, Peterson ended up getting a pretty sweet spot. The last game of the season, Peterson was playing with Hurdle and Logan Couture. and he was on the top power play with those guys. And of course, Erik Karlsson and Jacob Peterson, 8 points in his, I guess, 11 games that he played with the Sharks. So that is something, right? That's almost a 60-point pace. Like the numbers jump out as being not sustainable for sure. But also he's never been a guy to get deployment like this. And I'm not even saying it's a guarantee he'll get deployment like this. Like this is like a very small sample. It was the end of a nothing, stretch of the season for San Jose. But just, I don't know. I aim to remember, okay? If Jacob Peterson starts the season playing with Hurdle and or Couture and gets top power play, it's kind of like Barabanov last year, who I talked about maybe too much on the podcast, but he definitely had value at times.
So, he was somewhat on my radar that I thought he was too deep of a cut to end up adding to my list. And
we're like an hour and 15 minutes in here. So I think it's okay.
No, I'm with you. It's that same idea of just basically you're at the end of the draft, or depending on your league, where you drafted 1 or 2 injured players. So you have a space right after the draft and you have unlimited moves, and you just pick up people and you're just looking for lottery balls. He is a lottery ball. And that's definitely someone that I would be of the mind. And I think we're on the same page that he would be someone I would be quick to jettison if he doesn't do anything. But I have no qualms on assuming he's in that position that actually shows up that he is playing with those guys to, take a random waiver wire pickup and, do the dance of, if I'm not sure if we already know who's playing the random Europe games next year, but he's in a position to get some early games or whatnot, take a shot.
Yeah, I'm definitely not saying to draft Jacob Peterson, but just a guy who maybe know who he is, so that if he starts doing stuff, you could be ahead of the curve a little bit, a little less research maybe before you decide if you're going to add him or not.
Yeah, the old pre-draft watch list, but not draft.
Yeah, for sure. Here's another guy I'll bring up. This is an interesting case. I don't know if this is a buyer beware or buy low opportunity. I don't even know. Okay. But I think our last memory of Chris Kreider on the Rangers is he was probably one of their best players in that series against New Jersey. He had 9 points in 7 games, 6 goals. He was incredible. Of course, we also have a strong memory of Chris Kreider from a couple seasons ago when he scored 52 goals. But last season, just I remember, it's a reminder, Chris Kreider basically went back to being the guy that he had been previously in his career. And I just don't know if people remembered that. And I feel maybe the playoffs, maybe it's so long ago now that it won't rocket him up draft boards. But Kreider ended the year. I just want to remind people, 36 goals and 54 points in 79 games, which is good, rosterable, but he wasn't insane. So yeah, just if you have in your mind that Chris Kreider is this 50 goal, over point per game, superstar, he's shown that he could be, certainly, but last season he wasn't. And there were stretches last year, at the end of last season, when you were in your fantasy playoffs and you needed, your guys to really step up. I'm seeing 10 points in the final 19 games for Chris Kreider. So barely half point per game. Though 9 of those 10 points were goals. So that obviously helps you. But so just a reminder, I'm not saying good or bad, just reminding people what the numbers were. And Chris Kreider did go back to doing what he had been doing for the previous 10 years of his career before that huge breakout a couple seasons ago.
It will be interesting to see, because I feel the Rangers are just going to be that one big spot of just what are they going to do? Because they have the new coach, and no matter what, coaches have their own guys. So even the lines could be completely different. And then on top of it, we don't know what's going to happen with Kane and Tarasenko. I assume they're not going to come back, but I wouldn't be surprised if Kane does a random sweetheart deal somehow to stay around. I'm not sure if he said anything publicly. And then you have the discussion of basically Lafreniere and Kako, and then the kid line. I'm just there's just so much variance that could happen. And it's the Rangers got they could just randomly trade for a big name player, and hell, Kreider could be traded. There's just so much that could happen on during this offseason and the coaching impacts for the start of the season, that it's going to be interesting to see. And then just kind of keep in mind with what you said, but also keep in mind that things can change from now and then that might add or even make it worse to his stock. But obviously don't take him at the peak of 2 seasons ago, but the question now is where to take him from where he was last season and going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would draft him. My initial thought, like I haven't done a lot of research obviously yet, but like my initial thought is just take him with based on what he did last season. Like just assume that's probably what he'll do again. And I think you won't reach by doing that, but you also won't let him fall too far because he did still like 36 goals is great. Like if you could get that on your fantasy team, that's a key piece for you. But just like, you don't want to grab him like the second or third round just because of that amazing playoffs. And yeah, also remember New Jersey wasn't getting like the most amazing goaltending at times. So like you don't want to read too much into what the Rangers did in the playoffs there in that one series. Same with Panarin struggling by them. Well, just in general, like obviously one playoff series isn't enough data to make any big decisions on. Here's someone, I don't know, maybe people do remember this. Like maybe this was like a big storyline of last year, but just like the ups and downs of Thatcher Demko. I just want to like point that out really quickly. It's just because you're gonna look at like your total season stats when you're looking to draft goalies next year, and you may see that Demko ended with a 901 save percentage. Be like, that's not that great. Like, but he only played 32 games. I don't know. I don't know what people are gonna think, but just a reminder of like it was like two like separate people. Like he played 14 games in the first quarter of the season and was like dreadful. And Vancouver was abysmal. And he had an 885 save percentage. A lot of people drafted Demko as like their like, third goalie, fourth goalie off the board, maybe in their drafts. And he was like tanking. And then he got injured, and you were probably just like, thank goodness, because I'm stressed about whether I should like drop this guy or not. So at least now I can stash him in my IR. And then anyone who, did so and then got him back just in time for their fantasy playoffs got like a totally different goalie, got someone who like probably helped win them their leagues, right? Like Demko was really great at the end of the season, had a long stretch of like letting in only like 1 or 2 goals in most of Vancouver's games. Famously, Vancouver won maybe too many of those games, probably a lot thanks to Demko, and took themselves out of a top 10 pick there in this upcoming draft. And yeah, next year, again, like goalies are impossible to predict. I think Vancouver, like I believe more in what they did at the end of the season than at the beginning. Like, I don't think they're that. I also don't see how a team with like Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes, Thatcher Demko, like you'd think that they should be able, like obviously they have some depth issues. I'm not saying they're going to be incredible, but I think they're like not like just a terrible team. And so I'd imagine Demko, and that's another guy, by the way, with no threat. Like most goalies, and this is even rarer than defensemen, right? Like most goalies in the league now have like a backup who you could sometimes think, oh, I could see things playing out in a way where like maybe this goalie will, like end up losing a few games. Like, I was talking about Markstrom and Dustin Wolf or something. Like Demko, like no chance. Come on, like who even is the backup? Like Silovs, who actually had a good tournament. Speaking of that tournament, but I don't know, like Delia, is he still around, or Spencer Martin? Like I don't know. This is Demko's net for sure. He's going to play a ton of games, and I don't think he's going to stink like he did. Like I think he's just going to come in and be like really, maybe not like a Vesna, but like I think you could bank on like 910, 915 as much as you could bank on any goalie. I think Demko's going to be good. But yeah, just a reminder of how crazy that season was.
Oh yeah, and I think we're in the same boat. But the sad part is I'll be very surprised if I end up with him in any league, just because I feel like all it takes is one person to fall in love and like draft him too early for me, because he is my perfect. Like I don't think it will happen, but when I was talking about like Kemper trying to get the other guy that just is going to play all the games and maybe not win as much, or like be in a situation where the defense is not the greatest, and I brought up Husso, like a perfect world would be that somehow Demko fell, that you didn't have to spend too much draft capital and you got him there. But I feel like that he just wishful thinking, but like I just feel like someone's just going to pick him too early for me. But if you could somehow get him late and you are in that draft pool that doesn't believe in him, he could be that person that, he's going to have a random stinker on a Tuesday, but like when you add up his 3 games that he played that week, he's still going to be a net positive for you, then move the needle in your matchup.
Sorry. Yeah, I think so too. And like on Vancouver, a lot of value here, right? We're actually doing this patron rankings we've started. So anyone who's a patron Keeping Karlsson, if you haven't been checking in on our Discord lately, come join the fun. Every day we're voting on the next player who we think should be ranked for cupful scoring for next season. I think we're going to try to come up with something, by the way, Shams, for this season where like because every year basically there's like the the trade deadline and like all this like UFA, and then like a lot of players value changes, and like some guy who got traded all of a sudden he gets all the votes the next day just and maybe he would have been earlier, except we only just learned the news. I think we're going to try to come up with some mechanism to like re-rank some guys as news comes out about them, so that maybe by the end we could be like more feel. We haven't solved this yet, but we're gonna try to come up with something so that we can feel like really good about these rankings. By the way, huge shout out to Andrea who's facilitating this whole fun exercise. Anyway, I bring that up just because we're now on vote. Let me see here. What vote are we on now? I think vote 8 or vote 9. I'm just like bringing this up. Sorry, everyone. This is me, stalling. Okay, we're on vote 8 today. So 7 people have been ranked so far. I'll just spoil it. McDavid, Draisaitl, McKinnon, Matthews, Pasternak, Rantanen, Matthew Tkachuk. Obviously, he had a great year last year, but also I guess getting a bit of a playoff bump here, which is fair. He's been incredible. Anyway, I just saw today in vote 8 that Elias Pettersson got a vote, and like only one so far, but I think it is reasonable to, I don't know, maybe people just don't remember because now it's been a while. Like he ended the season with 105 points, 102 points, 105-point pace. So like we've been waiting like forever, since Pettersson's first season for him to really like take that next step and be like a huge stud. And he did it, like 100 points. Like I know 100 points isn't what it used to be, just like you can't get a Big Mac for $1 anymore or whatever people will say, but it's still like 100 points is 100 points. And I think Elias Pettersson showed that he might even have upside for more. Like if you look at the splits, he had I guess in any season, he had some stretches where he was even better than that, and some stretches where he was worse. All I'm saying is don't forget how awesome Pettersson was. And I'd imagine most people won't, and also I imagine he's not going to fall too far in drafts, but like if you're like doing a draft and you could get him like at the end of the first round, I'm like super high on Elias Pettersson. But that's obviously like a pretty cool take. Now that I'm saying, I'm like, why did I even bring this up?
Oh yeah, and also he is playing with like I totally forgot about Bolivier being on the team now and being with him. So him and Kuzmenko are like some interesting players maybe to take. I usually wait pretty close to the season to start doing projections and whatnot and taking in other people's data before doing my own. So I'm not really the best for the patron rankings, but like I'd be really interested in seeing what other people think and assuming that this line stays together and seeing a full season of Kuzmenko now in the NHL, and then Bolivier actually having a team that doesn't want to bury him just because he's not a defensive stalwart, and then them actually getting all that time together. It'll be interesting to see how much they leverage the Pettersson bump.
Yeah. And yeah, Beauvillier is someone definitely to, watch the lines in preseason. And Kuzmenko, this is an interesting guy because don't forget, there were stretches where he was getting bumped down the lineup, getting kicked off the top power play. And even with that, he ended the season with 38 goals and 73 points. So this was an incredible season. And maybe like he, new to the NHL, different rink, like whatever, different style of play. Like maybe it just took him some time to get accustomed to things. So maybe next year with Kuzmenko now with this year of experience under his belt, not getting these bumps down the lineup, sticking on the top power play, he might have upside for more as well. So Kuzmenko is definitely someone to not let off your radar. Maybe people don't realize just how strongly he ended the year just because there was a few ups and downs along the way. Okay, I guess there's time for one more. I don't know. Maybe not, but okay, let's do one more here. I'll do a couple more. Okay, I'll give you a goalie that, again, this is just one of my like shiny new toys probably. So just like, and then a guy who like was disappointing that I just want to remind people how disappointing he was. But I'll do the goalie first. Over in Buffalo, just don't forget, like they had a few goalies throughout the season, but Devin Levy at the end of the season, like he came in and did like exactly what people have been waiting for. He's been a high pedigree guy. Like if you look up lists, like if you're not a prospect person, I'll save you the clicks. You look up lists of like who are the top NHL prospect goalies. Usually Levy's like showing up in like the top 5 from most lists I see. And he came in, played 7 games, had a 905 save percentage, which doesn't sound like too great, but this is a guy like coming straight out of college, had some really big games in there, a couple blow ups, but what are you going to do? And this is the Buffalo Sabres still not like at the level that we think they could get to. And just the competition isn't really there. Like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Eric Comrie are still there. I'd imagine Craig Anderson finally will be done. I'm guessing. I guess we'll see. But I think there's a decent chance, like a pretty good chance that Levy, like this is more than Joel Hofer, right? Like Joel Hofer still has to bump Binnington. Just take it back to the show. And Binnington is like the high paid, like starter. Like he's like had all of his struggles and his blowups. So there's a reason to think Hofer could steal starts, but like Levy doesn't have to bump anyone entrenched. Like he just has to be better at training camp than Luukkonen or Luukkonen, I should say. I'm saying Luukkonen because Brian used to say it all the time. It got in my head. It sounded like a fun way to say it. But then people are like, what are you doing? It's just Luukkonen. But yeah, Luukkonen and Eric Comrie are not guys that I think are strong competition. So you might be able to get like a starting goalie late. This could be like the Vejmelka from a couple seasons ago, right? Like a guy who was on no one's radar, but then we saw in training camp, it looks like he might be the starting goalie. And before you knew it, yeah, he was getting like all the starts on Arizona. So we'll see what happens. But because also I think Buffalo, they came close to the playoffs, right? Like they're trying to win games. So they're going to go with the goalie. Like there's no point to like, oh, we need to wait, like season Levy, like make sure he's fully ready. Like if they think he's their best chance to win, I think they're going to play him.
Yeah, this is going to be the weird situation is that like I have zero clue of where to draft him, but like his ceiling is just like so high that like it's going to be an interesting point if like, as you can hear, I'm always pessimistic about people reaching for goalies and me not getting people. Like I have a feeling I'm never going to be in the position to draft him, but like if he starts falling, I have zero clue how to attack it. But like, if you are open for variance and you're feeling good about your team and it's a certain part of the draft, like each league is different and whatnot, I'm not going to give out rounds here, but like this could be a league winner pick depending on when you take him and if he plays out. But like, as we mentioned before, is that like, he could easily end up as just like, you know, they kept on playing Comrie when they probably shouldn't have. Like, I wouldn't be surprised with like coaches and logical goalie starts are not 1-1 all the time. So hopefully they bring out the young guy and he's playing. But like, if he ends up having a bad stretch, say at the start of the season, like how much were we pumping out Knight? And like, you know, hopefully everything comes out with the situation he's in now. But like, even when he was playing, he wasn't the greatest. So I just want to put some breaks that like, yeah, the ceiling's there, but the floor is also there. So just
of course
keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't reach for Devin Levy, but maybe don't leave him undrafted. Like take a shot on him if you're at the end of your draft and you could use a goalie.
Oh God, yes. If it was late in the draft, I'd be all over him. I just have a feeling that someone's going to be hyped up. If he's like, if the news is that he's like most likely or slated as a starter, I just think someone's going to like, oh, I got the next Shesterkin or like, that's my vision of just had the drafts I've been in. But like, if he's late in the draft, I'm not letting him go on.
Right. Which is kind of funny because Luukkonen was like, you know, like people were really high on him just recently. And now it was like yesterday, it seems like he could still be something. And that could be a reason to maybe, again, also pump the brakes on Levy just because maybe Luukkonen is good enough to, you know, maybe for that to split the net, which is obviously a recipe for success. I always thought it was interesting how Boston went all season splitting the net with Allmark and Swayman. Basically had one of the best seasons of any team ever. Like such a great season. And then in the playoffs, they just went to Allmark the whole time. And it's like, you had a recipe that works. Like, why change it now? Anyway, we'll see if next year finally, I think next year might be the year where we finally see a team just like actually alternate their goalies, even in playoffs. But we'll see. Maybe Buffalo's that team.
Oh, Carolina was the closest. Like,
yeah, they gave Ranta a game randomly here and there, even when Anderson wasn't terrible the game before. That's true. Okay, let's end in Detroit. Okay, I've got a guy that I don't even know what the takeaway is, but I just want to remind people that Moritz Seider was so great 2 seasons ago. This is like Chris Kreider, right? Like just had such an amazing rookie season, ended with 50 points as like a 21-year-old, you know, with like a ton of shots, like, well, not a ton of shots, but like over 2 shots per game, which is good. Like then like, you know, over 150 hits, 160 blocks. It was a really great rookie season for Seider. It was like, what, sky's the limit. Like Detroit is getting better. Then last year was like a step back in his numbers, like down to 42 points in 82 games. Even though I should point out, if you look at the peripherals, Seider in the same number of games, a lot more hits. He went from 151 to 207 and a lot more blocks. Okay. 161 to 190. So the peripherals, I know Shams, you always say how you like those defensemen, you give you a good floor. Seider was even better. And he was already, we were calling a guy with a good peripherals like 2 seasons ago, but the points went down a bit. He also like for stretches wasn't on the top power play. I think Hronek was there, but like Hronek's gone. Hronek's on Vancouver. So I'm just like saying, I'm sort of like, remember, I'm sure people will remember that Sider had a bit of a down year last year, but I also like remember where he was being drafted at the start of the year, and maybe consider if maybe that is still somewhat, maybe not as high, but like still somewhat worthy. Like I think there's a decent chance that now Sider, it will be the guy you could draft at the value you got him at like in his rookie season, and he might also give you the value that you had in his rookie season. Like I think him falling down drafts is a great opportunity. And actually, I just remembered I'm talking to a Wings fan here, so you can probably speak to it better than anyone. Like Sider is still for sure their like go-to guy, right? Like I don't think there's anyone who's going to be jumping in and challenging him for power play this year. Or am I missing something?
So I think the big thing, if I remember correctly, I think there's always like one or two players that this happens to, but I could have sworn that Sider got the Dom Luszczyszyn bump on the Athletic. I think it was like him and Meyer were the two people that his projections loved. And then I think that helped leading to him getting drafted high. And then it was a double sting of his play not coming out as well. So it will be interesting to see, because I like from a hockey perspective, Sider I love. And then the big thing is that the start of his season was sketchy because he was paired with Sherratt, which just didn't work out for the chemistry between them. So the interesting thing is, and this might be a hot take because I'm a Red Wings fan, but like if you talk to any Red Wings fan and you bring up Jake Wallman, everyone loves him from like just like the offensive prowess. So like Sider, I feel like is like same perspective from Nurse, that he's like the bedrock defensive guy, and that like if he gets points for you, great, but like he's not brought in for the points. So like I'll be curious to see how like most likely Sider will be if I was to place a bet, the power play one. But like just because Herodic's gone, I wouldn't say that he's like, you know, how we were joking about like Columbus and other teams of just like there's zero chance for him to get supplanted. I feel like if Wallman keeps up what he does, because he was doing some really nice offensive plays, that he could take it over. It'll be interesting to see now with playing time, is that in a perfect world, if we have Wallman and Sider good, and then also if Edvinsson is in a position to play a decent amount of minutes with maybe Sherratt as the second pair, to see is that maybe I have no real strong feeling about a third pair. So maybe even with just four good defensemen, Sider still could get minutes, but it'll be interesting to see how he gets leaned on from a playing time point if there is an actual half decent second pair and the threat. And I use the word threat like probably like overblowing it, of Wallman potentially sneaking in and taking power play time. But like, yeah, don't be draft him as like Nurse 2.0 and like better than that. But like he could be always one of those ones of the steals, because he is a guy that's going to be in the hits and blocks. So even if he doesn't get the points, I'll be happy, but it's going to be an awkward position to try to find out where to draft him.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, don't let him fall too far. Maybe don't reach too much like you did last year, but there's potential for a lot here. This Wallman thing, I guess anything could happen. I'd be pretty surprised if Jake Wallman becomes the top power play guy. I guess he could be, Wallman is like the new Tommy Novak, if that's the case. 27 years old. I guess he like did get some games. Like Wallman now has played 139 games, but last year was the first year definitely the first year where we mentioned him on the podcast. I think before that, I would have not been able to tell you that he was on the Detroit Red Wings. Anyways, Shams, this hour and a half, almost hour 40 now, is blown by. It's been so fun. Thanks so much for coming on with me and just talking about all of these potentially under the radar players for good or bad reasons. What are your plans moving forward here? Let's talk playoffs super quick. Do you have a rooting interest here with these final three teams remaining? Want to give us a quick prediction?
So for me, it's one of those situations is that my hope is for Vegas to win. Not much for Vegas. It's just, and this will be probably from a homer's perspective, is I hate JB Ben. Just because if you don't,
fair.
Well, the thing is that if you don't remember, I think it's enough got brought up because of his shenanigans. He did take out Dylan Larkin with a cross check to the back of the neck. So basically he has been doing this, and I just hate to see him get rewarded. So it's an anti-pick there. And then while I would love to see, especially when my team's not involved, the Cinderella story. So I would love to see the Panthers win, but if I was to guess, if it was Panthers versus Vegas, I will guess that I would want Panthers to win, but I think Vegas takes it.
Okay, I'll go on the limb, if it even is a limb, and go with the Panthers. I feel like Matthew Tkachuk, Bobrovsky can't be stopped right now. They're too good, too exciting. And also now they finally get to rest. You know how big it is in the playoffs. All these players like nursing mystery injuries. It might be like really huge for them that this Dallas Vegas series keeps going longer and longer. Anyways, yeah, it's been a blast talking to you. Thanks also everyone for listening. We always appreciate any listeners in these summer episodes where I know maybe fantasy hockey isn't at the top of your mind, but if you are listening, you've got the edge, right? Like who else is talking about Tommy Novak and Jacob Peterson, on a podcast, and who else is listening to a podcast? Like these are, hopefully we're not sending you astray. Hopefully we're just giving you the tools you'll need to really be on the ball come fantasy next year. But before we know it, by the way, there's going to be stuff to talk about, right? We're going to have the playoffs will end, and then we're going to have the draft, then we're going to have free agency and trades. It's going to be really fun. So we got a fun couple months ahead. If you want to join the fun of the voting and everything going on with our patron community, we've got our Discord going, and right now for just $1 a month, you could become a patron and get all of our perks. So just check that out. Come hang out. Why not? It's fun. KeepingKarlsson.com/patron. And also you'll be the first to get news as we start ramping up for the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League next season. Registration will be opening soon. I think Brian and I have vowed with Kevin, like by the end of the playoffs, we're going to have it ready. So we're running out of time here. So we really got to get it going here. But we have big plans for sure for next year. It's going to be epic. Okay. I'll just say it. But yeah. So thanks for listening. I'll cue the outro music. And the credits are basically like, I just use Frozen Tools. I'll be honest, like that's like the main site I used. I don't know, Shams, do you have any other credits aside from Frozen Tools?
I used Frozen Tools and went back and saw some short shifts information. Sometimes just having short shifts, it might not be just the spur of the moment. You need to remember about players in the past and our favorite website, Game Day News.
Oh, yeah, of course. I guess I should also mention I use Twitter still. I don't know for how much longer. It's really frustrating. It used to be that like if I wanted to see like the most like latest news about a player, but like by like trusted sources, I could just search for like only tweets by verified users, and then I would know, okay, now I'm going to get what the beat writers and what the journalists are saying about Jake Wallman or whoever. Now if you search for only verified users, you get like the opposite. It's like the worst takes. It's like all the crazy people who are verified on Twitter now. So it's a bummer that I've lost that resource, but I still do find Twitter useful if you follow the right people.
Well, it's something to remind people, because I have been still using it from time to time, is that we do have, or if you want to see past news and want to find things, we do have the player search on gamedaytweets.com. And that is such a great thing. So you don't have to be trying to find a tweet or something from, a week or two ago. You could just look it up and you'll get Elan and I's verification stamp, and we're not been sold out yet. So trust the people we retweet.
Yeah, I just searched for Wallman here on Game Day News. Let's see what we got here. We've got a tweet back from February 28th that the Wings signed him to a 3-year contract extension, $3.4 million a year. And then there's a tweet from February 27th, which was about how he's fine after a punishing loss to Ottawa. Details are uncertain at this time, but it's believed Wallman was closing on an extension. Okay, so it's just basically both talking about that, a contract extension. So maybe next year Wallman will get some more news for our site. But yeah, I've said thanks a million times. So all I will say is that as you enjoy the rest of the playoffs and are waiting with bated breath for the next Keeping Karlsson episode, be sure to do your best to make it that fantasy hockey is for everyone. See ya. All right. Thanks, Shams. That was great. Thanks, Andy and Andrea in the chat. Always great.
Just a quick story for the YouTube folks. It's so funny thing is that I recently it was like about like November-ish, joined a new company for work, and it's just like hockey talk gets banted about, and somehow like Keeping Karlsson got brought up. It was a funny story. Is that like I was telling a coworker about the site. He's like, we having a chat message with like a friend of his in the league, and it's like the person on the other side is like, no, I told you about that website last year. So I guess we got my company is now a hotbed for Keeping Karlsson. I'll spread out the good word. These people are not in my league, so I don't have to do the old joke of worrying about bettering my opponents. So I'm seeing our the podcast.
Sweet. Okay, appreciate that. Yeah, get those extra short shifts downloads. People who want to hear their coworker. I don't think anyone in my work listens to the podcast, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just don't say anything. But all right, thanks again, Shams. This was awesome. Yeah, talk to you later.
Thank you for having me.
See ya.